The topic for today is really my mantra ever since I started at Bayan Academy, which was 4 years ago. And for those who are not familiar with mantra, it is something that we repeat over and over and over to convince ourselves and others that that's the truth. Not everybody may agree with my truth, but it is my truth, and it comes from Islam. So I'm hoping that it will be accepted as everybody's. So growing up, I was always an observer. And what I found was adults looked at children like they were a different species of creature, right? We don't lie. He's only 5, he won't know the difference, right? We don't backbite. Oh, they're just our students, it's okay, right? We don't steal. I can borrow my son's money, he's at school, he won't know. I gave it to him anyway, right? That's what I observed growing up in the Muslim community and in the non-Muslim community. Children were considered non-human. They were children, it was like a different species. And whatever rules we had for adults didn't apply to our kids, right? We wouldn't go to our boss and start yelling at them, but we yell at our kids. We would listen to an expert give us advice, but if a 6-year-old gave us advice, it's, what do you know? You're just a kid. So, I had a rough childhood. I was that kid that nobody wanted in the session, okay? And if I attended a session, I wish I had these people's names. I could go back and tell them I'm the head of school now, by the way. They would look at me, who raised you? That was the question. And in Arabic, it's me and Rabbaki. That's how you usually got it was in Arabic. Whose child are you? And then they find out who my father was, like, oh, he has a daughter like you? How awful for him. I was one of those people who nobody wanted me in the session. And I never understood why. And I just decided I'm not going to try and please anybody anymore. Because it doesn't work. Nobody is happy with me anyway. I'm just going to, find my way and I'll work on pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And everybody else, I'm not really going to worry about. 15 years ago, I got a letter from my sister. And to put it in perspective, I'm 52, so 15 years ago I was 37. I'm not a child anymore, and I've been head of school for a long time, 12 years. And she sends me this letter and says, I figured out why nobody liked you. Well, it's a nice way to start a letter, right? So I wasn't just imagining it. Nobody liked me. And she said it's because you were smarter than they were. But you were 7, and you were a girl. And those two things combined, you can't correct adults, especially if they're men. Because you're not a person yet. You're a child. And so at least I figured it out. And at least it was a compliment, right? I was smart. Okay, it didn't feel like it when I was growing up. And I was a girl. And we won't go there. But the reason I ended up in my job is because growing up there were a few people who treated me like a person. And they were educators. One of them, if you know her name is Dr. Frida Shamma. She is close to 80 years old probably now, and I've known her since 1969. But she was one of those people who, when I was 7, she said, oh, you're so smart. I'm like, but I asked so many questions. She said, that means your mind is working. That's a good sign. So every few years, somebody would come along and make a statement that made sense, that made me feel respected. And that's the attitude that now I try to use with our students. We have to respect their minds. We have to respect them as people, but we also have to respect their intellect. So that's what this is about. It goes into social emotional learning, some different things. But inshallah, we will benefit, and you will benefit me. So, before I started the presentation, and I will admit this is a recycled presentation. I did it last month at a conference, and the dates are all wrong on the presentation, and I apologize, the one that I gave you. So I Googled students' interest in school, because that's what we're in charge of, right? We're all in schools. And it says students are losing interest in school. 318 million results came up in less than a minute about students losing interest in school. And these were the reasons they listed. Number 1 was bullying. And And I will tell you that bullying is not only from other students. Bullying is from teachers as well. Okay? We may not recognize it, but bullying is also, and it's sometimes very subtle. Oh, you're asking me again? After the third or fourth time, that child's self-worth is gone. They listed bad teachers. I don't like that term. There are no bad teachers. They just need to be trained. So I put bad instruction, poor instruction. So it's not a bad teacher, and there's no bad student, there's no bad teacher. If you've given up your morning to go to school to teach, there's something really good about you. We just need to guide you. Difficult syllabus. We don't know where our students are, and so we're teaching kids at a level that does not match their ability. We had an accreditation visit one year, a few years ago, and one of the accreditors, he sat with me at a break, and he said, oh, it looks like you teach all the students at their level. And I'm like, isn't that what we're supposed to do? And he said, yes, but most schools don't. So teaching at their level. Learning difficulties. We know there are so many learning difficulties in students. Most of them are very easy to work with, but you have to have them evaluated, and you have to learn the strategies for working with them, and then they can become very successful. Distractions in the environment. That's in school and outside of school. That's the TV. That's the internet. That's the azaim at midnight, and that means when you have guests over from out of town and they're there till midnight and kids can't do their homework. Fear of assessment. They don't fear the test, they fear failing the test. Okay? I had a teacher once who is no longer with me, but she made a comment to the students. I don't care how hard you study, nobody's going to do well on this test. Why should I try? Right? You knocked it out before you even started. Why even go to the effort? But these are real life situations, and I'm sure every one of you knows somebody that does that. We're not recognizing their achievements. So we did standardized testing. We got our results back this year. Our teachers met with all the parents who needed help. Their scores weren't high enough. And then I went through all the data, and I had a student who improved 25 percentile points in 2 months. Nobody called her mom. I said, this girl, you need to call her mom. Oh, but she did well. We need to recognize that they did well. So she knows all that hard work I did this year, it paid off. Studies are not challenging. That's the opposite side of the spectrum. You have those genius kids, and somehow in the Muslim community we have a monopoly on genius kids, a lot of smart kids in our school, and we're not giving them a challenging curriculum. And then the focus is on studying and not learning. Maybe you want to give me a difference between those two things? It's interesting what teachers sometimes understand. Yes, Ms. Hamda.
The focus on studying and not learning. Sometimes we just drill the student just for them to pass the test.
Yes.
And this is not what we're supposed to be focusing on.
Yes.
Not drilling for the test. We need to teach students for the long term.
The long run. And I tell people, if you don't know anything that's on the standardized test, you're not supposed to know what's on the standardized test. If you teach well, your student will do well on any standardized test because they've learned the material. They're not just regurgitating what you put into them. Right? For those who don't know, regurgitate, it means after you swallow it, it comes back up. I've learned with time that not everybody knows the vocabulary I use, and then we're stuck because nobody knows what I'm talking about. So this is one of my pet peeves for the last 10 years, 12 years. It's really become an issue with me.
Yes.
And I call it the ADD, ADHD phenomenon because I don't think it's a fact. I think that there are people who have ADD, and I think there are people with ADHD, but I also think that 80% of the people being diagnosed with both don't have either. Okay? We have given a label to children that they don't deserve. I need you to keep in mind, 84% of all students diagnosed with ADHD are discipline problems. Are they discipline problems because they have ADHD? Or because they've been mislabeled and we're treating them as if they have a problem and they're not regular children? I would argue that it's because we're not treating them as children, because they don't have ADHD. The rate of increase of ADHD diagnoses in the last 15 years has increased by about 70%. Do we honestly think that people have evolved so much in the last 15 years that we have that much more ADHD? The scarier part is that same percent increase in the same number of years is in childhood suicide. Why are 9-year-olds hanging themselves? Why are they even thinking about ending their life? To know that there's an increase in childhood suicide that matches exactly the increase in diagnoses, it's not proven scientifically that they're connected. There's something not right, and I'm so glad to see you here, Noor, because that technology stuff is half of what's leading us here. So these numbers are important to keep in mind when you look at the students in your class. And I'll tell you, when I was at Aya, we had 530 students. I had one student on medication. And he was required by me. He could not enter the building. I mean, I could tell from the car, he didn't have his medication. I would tell his mom, keep driving. But out of 530 kids, one student. We had a lot of hyperactive kids, but they were just hyperactive kids. They did not need to be medicated for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So, there are a lot of young people here, and it's so nice that a lot of young people now are in education and administration. For those of you over 50, you don't have to raise your hand, you know who we are. When you were in school, were there kids in your class that would now be diagnosed at ADHD? Were you one of those kids? Yes. Yes. Okay? They didn't have the medication back then, which was good. What was the difference in what was done with those kids? If you know they're from overseas, they hit you. Okay. I lived in Saudi for 9 months. Every single day, I got hit. I was 4. Called to the front of the class, put out your hand, they get the ruler, you go back and it was just became my routine. You never call my name, okay, just give me my thing, you know. That's overseas. But in America, they didn't do that. We had a lot of recess time. We had a lot of recess time. A lot of outdoor play equipment, a lot of art, we had music. There were all these different classes in school where kids were not sitting in their seats. There weren't tests all the time. Elementary school students were children, and they enjoyed life, and believe it or not, our scores on standardized tests were better than they are today. Keeping students in a chair for more hours does not make them smarter. It makes them angry. Okay? They're not happy. So when you look at kids in your class, you have to look at, is there really a problem with the child? Or is there a problem with the way I'm teaching that child? And it may not be a problem with the teacher. It may be a system problem. There's a problem in the school. We're expected to do this and this and this, and we don't have the independence to make different decisions to make our children's lives better. So, memory lane. And the interesting thing about memory is the older you get, you can actually think back better, right? Our long-term memory gets better and our short-term memory gets worse. But I want you to take a few seconds and think, who were the best teachers you had growing up? And what made them the best teacher you had? Yes, sister, you had that. And you see, it's funny, you look at people's faces, and they just brighten up because they remember this teacher. You know her name? It could have been 30, 40 years ago, but you remember them. What did your teacher do that made her your best teacher, or him?
It was in the first grade and second grade because I went very little, so
Okay.
6 years, but I went for foreign something.
Okay.
I'm always in her holding me and teaching.
Okay, so there's love.
Yeah.
There's love, right? I went to a student last year and I said, you know we love you, right? He said, I don't think they did at the school I came from. But there's love. And so I tell people, you have to love your kids and you have to let them know that you love them. You can love them from a distance and they'll never know. You have to let them know that you love them. Somebody else, yes, Rashida.
Okay, during high school English teacher.
Okay.
He loved, he was totally impassioned
About what he
with
did.
his subject.
Okay.
And with the students. And he engaged us with literature in a way that just made you want to jump into.
So, 2 words. What did she say?
Passionate.
Passionate and engaged, right? I'm sure that you had something like that in your session, because that's what a responsive classroom is. It starts with the passion, and then you engage them, and they enter into that passion, right? So, that's the good ones. How about this one? And I did this last month at the Step Up for Students conference in Lakeland. There were people in that room who needed therapy. There was trauma. No, there was trauma. They read that slide, and the trauma was on their face. It had been 20 years ago, maybe, but they were still traumatized by their worst teacher. And it was really, that was not my intention. My intention is not to cause trauma, everybody. But it had left deep, deep scars inside of them. Anybody? Somebody, yes, brother, wallah.
Yes, we had a teacher when I was a student who, when you walk into his class, if you drop a pin, you will hear it. Everybody hated him, but this is the way he did his business. Somebody else might do it different. That's not the way to teach, I think.
Everybody was just forced to be totally quiet, right? And some teachers, that's the only way they can teach. Teachers, some of them, everybody has a different way, and some of them quiet works, but it's a loving quiet. And it's a quiet passion, and everybody's engaged, but it's quiet. Not till you hear a pin drop, but it's quiet. And some people have controlled chaos. It sounds like, I had a teacher like this year. I used to call it the Jumanji classroom. Anybody know Jumanji when everything starts to shake? Yeah, because every day she would change the desks, and I'm like, Jumanji's happening, and we could hear all the desks moving. But those kids were engaged. We would just wait 10 seconds, they were all in the right place, and then class would continue. But everybody has a different one. Yes, who's your worst teacher?
Oh, that was in middle school.
Okay?
Let's say 40 years ago, my math teacher.
Okay.
She used, if I give the wrong answer, she used to hit me and display with the metal.
Oh, goodness. I just get a wing
I
ruler.
hated math since that
Yes.
moment.
And I will tell you that from that group of teachers I met with, by the way, the majority of trauma was from middle school
Yeah.
math teachers.
But
I'm serious. They all remembered their middle school math teacher. Yes, ma'am.
when I went to high school,
Yes.
I had wonderful teachers.
Alhamdulillah. And you,
And I loved math, and they understood
so,
math.
she said 40 years ago.
40 years ago.
And you think that when you say something to a student today, that you're not impacting them for the next 40 years? You've heard it now. Those memories don't go away. If it is a good memory, they will carry it with them. And those are the people, when you are at your janazah, they'll be making dua for you. And those other ones, I'll tell you, they also, because they're good people, they're going to be at your janazah. And they're making dua for you, for Allah to forgive you. I've been to both kinds of janazahs. You have the ones where they're like, oh, please Allah forgive him. He was terrible. And then you have the ones that they were so good. But we all want them to go to Jannah. It's just a different dua. And this will be the last comment. Yes, sister.
So one of the worst teachers I've encountered, and
Yes.
this is something that we do unintentionally, children do not understand sarcasm. You
Yes.
might think they're laughing, I think they're engaged, but when we use sarcasm to hurt their feelings, those were one of the worst teachers I've encountered.
And it's not always intentional to hurt their feelings. Some of us just grew up with sarcasm,
Yeah.
and you get used to it. And I stopped maybe 12 years ago. So I was 40 when I stopped. And I stopped because I read the hadith about the 3 houses in Jannah. And one of them was for people who don't lie, even when they're kidding. And that's sarcasm. We are not being honest. And I stopped. I didn't realize that it came under that category. So some things we grew up that way. Everybody's sarcastic, everything's a joke. And then we realized, you know what, that's leaving an imprint. And Allah knew that from a long time ago, because He created us. And there are hadith and there are ayahs about these things that we have to go back to, inshallah. So we're never going to be the bad teacher. Okay, so this is a picture, so I use it on my cover. I got some interesting feedback about this one. emotion that it evokes? And is there any relevance to the frame? So just think about it for a minute. And I'm gonna have somebody say something who didn't talk already. When you talk first, you can't talk at the end. That's how I teach. I make everybody say something. So, anybody want to volunteer who hasn't said something? Yes, ma'am. I don't know your name, but please go ahead.
I feel like it's just imagination, creativity that's stuck in a box. It can't go anywhere.
You're my twin. Anybody have a different feedback? Because it means I heard some very interesting things. Yes, ma'am.
Just looks like a brain with a lot of colors, and it looks like something's going on and somebody's thinking.
Okay.
That's what I see.
Third one different? Anybody want to share something? No? So to me, the brain looks like what somebody said. A lot of things going on that are different. A lot of activity, different types of activity. And the frame is what a lot of classrooms are. It's a box. And we take the brain and we try to put it in a box. And we think that everybody's brain is going to be the same, right? And I'm one of those teachers that I'm like the kids. If I'm in a classroom too long, I feel like I'm in a box. And we take them outside and I teach them outside. Because I cannot stay in a box. And how dare I use poor grammar, we don't need no, and then education. But it's the education, it's the wrong kind of education that we don't need. We don't need the boxes. So this is our goal, right? We want everybody's light bulbs to go on. We want them to be sitting in that class, ask the question about who's your favorite teacher, and everybody's face just lit up, right? You remember your favorite teacher. We want that same face when we talk about math, when we talk about biology, when we're talking about history, because who needs history? It's so boring, right? If that's the student in your class, history is not boring. History is not boring. History teachers can be extremely boring. But I've had amazing history teachers that brought the history to life and they made it relevant and they engaged the students. So you have that passion, you engage kids, you can take a boring subject and make those light bulbs turn on, inshallah. So, how do we do this? Raise your hand if you have brain breaks in your class and you call them brain breaks. Okay? Raise your hand. I want people to see how few we have who do brain breaks. Okay, 5 people out of about 50. You don't call them brain breaks? What do you call them? I don't even know who's talking. Who's talking? Raise your hand so I can see who you are. Oh, so what do you call them? Fun time, stretch time, that's fine. They are brain breaks. We need to give the brain a break. More outside playtime. Again, that's one of those things where if you're not the boss, you might not be able to do that. So one of the things that Bayan, that people say we can't do, but we do every day, is we have 3 recesses. 10:15, 11:40, and 2:15. Every single day. 15-minute recess, they run outside, they play soccer, they play on the playground, any kind of activity they want to do to get that energy out. When you give out energy, you have to consume energy. So 3 times a day, they eat. Okay? If you look at our policy, it says bring lunch and 2 snacks, because those kids are going to eat 3 times a day. So I went to the ISNA conference last year, and this angry man stood up and called us a liar. He said, you can't do that. I said, yes, we do. You can't, because yesterday you gave a session and said how much you're covering in academics and how much they're memorizing in Quran. And I said, the reason they can learn is because we give them breaks. You can't keep a child sitting and expect them to absorb more information. You have to give them breaks. If you live up in Michigan, it's snowing, you can't take them outside, but you can take them to the gym. They can do jumping jacks. They have to do that. And then they need to consume. I have a teacher, I don't know if she's here. I won't mention, I don't think she's in here, but by 2:30 in the afternoon, she'd be passing out. I had a staff Remember, I told you, your job is to give her a granola bar every day at 2:30. Because even as an adult, her energy was running out. So kids' energy runs out, and they need to eat. We can't keep kids away from food. They shouldn't be eating all day long, but schedule breaks. And it's not a meal. It's an apple, it's carrot sticks, it's some raisins, something healthy that's gonna give them energy for the next 2 hours so that you can teach them. Weir makes kusamashi. I'm sorry, we're Middle Eastern, right? What happens when you stuff it too much? It explodes, right? There's only so much you can put in a container at one time before it explodes when you try and put something else. If you're not Arab and woman and you do science, super saturated solutions, what happens when you put that extra grain of sugar in after it's saturated? Right? You put sugar in water and you dissolve it, and it dissolves, and then you put in a thing of sugar. What happens? It turns into sugar again, right? It comes out of the water, and it stops mixing smoothly. So our brains are the same. We have to give it a break. We have to know where the point of explosion is, and not go to that point. Like I had a student once who went, it has nothing to do with this. We went to the beach. I always do this. I take our students to the beach, and she says, Sister Magda, how about we walk out as far as we can until we drown? And I'm like, how about you walk out, and when you drown, I'll know not to go that far. Okay? So we don't want to experiment with our kids. Know their limit. Don't push them until they drown. Okay? These are all true stories, by the way. My students know me. They're like, oh, she's going to tell a story. And they get all quiet. That's how I do it. So this is the Finland project. Have you heard about the Finland project? It was done over years. And they studied Finland. Now Finland, we can't always, people want to compare it to America. It's not. It's a tiny little country. They can do a lot more, probably more easily than we can. But we can do this within our schools. So they studied the people. And I read the study. And these two things stood out to me. The first one was, we do whatever it takes to reach every child, that's the first one, and ensure his or her success. So the success is not my evaluation. The success is not the test score. It's about the student's success. And we reach every one of them. If you've been teaching for a few years, think about students that you are not able to reach. And most teachers have students that they just can't reach. It's like this one kid, I can't get to them. We have to reach every student. It takes effort, it takes creativity, it takes love, and it takes passion, and it takes getting to know every child. Children in Finland are not allowed to take standardized tests before 6th grade. But the reason why is more important. We know every one of our children well enough, we don't have to test them on a standardized test. We don't have to give them a test to know that they cannot add fractions. We know from teaching them. I go into classes sometimes, give me a weakness of every student you have. Well, let me get my grade book. You're not allowed to get your grade book. You need to know your students. End of the year, we do awards. Every single student in the school has to get an award. And every single year, my teachers will give me lists, and there will be one student with nothing good next to it, next to their name. And one thing, you couldn't find one good thing about this child. Allah created this child. There's got to be something good about them, but we haven't taken the time to get to know them and see the good in them. And if you start seeing the good, you start working with them harder, because you realize they're not my trouble child. They just have some issues I need to work with, and then they're going to become one of my best students. Okay, so it's a process. Finland figured it out, and by the way, they had a lot of criticism that they're all white, they're all one religion, it's easier to do these things. They have some of the highest diversity in the world, especially the last 10 years with all the refugees that have been pouring in. Very diverse population, but they've been able to use the same system with all of the kids. So, we're supposed to have a lecture after this about social emotional learning, so I'm not going to talk, but it was canceled. So that's not going to be the focus. I just want to go through, everybody's familiar with Gardner's multiple intelligences? If you're not, raise your hand. We'll go through them. The multiple intelligences. So they started out as 6, then they became 8. The 9th one, not everybody likes to talk about because it's spiritual. So they don't even call, I wrote spiritual, they call it existential. You're aware of what's outside of you. But it's really the spiritual. And they did discover that every single child has a spiritual side. But people who don't want to talk about religion don't want to talk about that one, but they're all there. So the first one is what we normally rely on, verbal. You know the answer, you give me the answer. You know the answer, I'm going to talk to you, got it? Everybody got it? We're good. We talk. Then there's the logical. Everything's got to make sense. You have those kids. Why? Because I said so. You just lost that student. I said so is not an answer. It doesn't work. I don't know, very few people here know my father, Brother Wallah Muslim. He never answered a single question we asked him. Drove us bananas. But as adults, we understood why. Why do we do this? Go get this book. Look it up. Find the page. He said, you will never in your life tell somebody that I do this because my father said so. You better have a better reason than that. Because that's what makes you a thinker. That's what gives you purpose. But if we're always giving the answers, and if it's because I said so, well, my mom said so. I'm like, who's your mom? What does she know, right? And they may be really smart moms. I'm sorry, double moms. But we need to, that logical part. So some kids don't care. You said so, they'll do it. But we have those smart kids. They want to know. And you have to be able to tell them. The spatial ones. You can't just say, turn left at the corner. Go to the corner, turn left. They have to see it, right? They know directions and space. The bodily, they have to move. These are the kids where they're sitting under the desk and they're facing the back of the class, but they make 100 on the test. Because they can't sit in a chair. They're going to be moving and fidgeting, but they're going to get it. The musical intelligence. And believe it or not, the musical intelligence is very closely tied to the Quran. I did not realize this till my son started learning Quran Azhar. They teach them do, re, mi, and all the different scales. They train their ears musically. So kids who just tend to like Quran, they may be the ones that get the rhythm of the Quran. They get rhythm. They're the ones who have to make a poem to explain how you do dividing fractions. Right? You got to put it to a beat. Give it to them so they can do it that way. Interpersonal and intrapersonal. I want to volunteer, besides someone who's talked, to give me the difference between interpersonal and intrapersonal. That's English. Who's a good English? Yes, ma'am.
Interpersonal within themselves, or intra amongst within.
So that's exactly opposite. Now, how do I remember that? Because I'm like you. I get them confused every time. International means you're going from one nation to another. So inter means you're going from one to another. So interpersonal is my relationship with other people. Some people are just good at it. Those are the problem solvers. Those are the ones that are fight on the playground. They'll come and make everybody be nice, right? They understand those interpersonal relationships. And they work well in those situations. And once you identify them in your classroom, use them for good. Help them make the class a better place. Then you have the intrapersonal, which means they understand themselves. Okay? Islam as a religion is a very reflective religion, right? Before we go to bed, we're supposed to think about everything we did during the day and reflect on what to do better or what not to do the next day. Culture is not reflective. Our culture in the Muslim world has trained people that if you think about yourself, you're selfish. Right? If you try and understand yourself, you're selfish. And one year when I was at Aya, I made selfish the word. Everybody had to become selfish. Because I told them one day you're going to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He tells us, you're by yourself. You need to know yourself. You need to focus on yourself. And when you focus on yourself, you become a better person towards other people. Right? Because Islam says if you're good, you have to be generous. You have to be kind. You have to help people. So if I'm selfish and I want to be the best I can be, then I have to be good to everybody else. But if I'm not reflecting on who I am, then I can't be that best person. And so our culture has taken us away from reflection, even though it's very much a part of who we are as Muslims. The naturalist intelligence, those are the people who love nature. They cannot write an essay in a classroom. Put them outside, sit them on the grass, give them a notebook and a pen, and they will do wonders, right? They like nature. And then the existential. They're like, they have they're connected to the other world. They have a very good spirit. They're connected spiritually. They may not focus so well when you're teaching. You gotta call them back, focus for a little bit, then you let them go back and daydream a little bit. So all these different intelligences exist. Here's the question. Can you go through your class and put every student in one of these categories? Why not? No, but can you put that at the top as 9 columns and then put a student under each one of those? That's my evil question for the day. No, you cannot. Because every student has more than one. Right? So we're not only one kind. I can be a naturalistic learner, plus logical, plus kinesthetic. So I've seen a lot of workshops where they brought up these kids. I'm the this, and I'm like, nobody's the this. Everybody has multiple intelligences. Some people may have all of them. Some people may be just amazing in everything, but don't pigeonhole people. Some people have these trainings, and I'm going to multiple this is a kinesthetic learner, and then we just label them. That's not all they are. We need to know how many of these things, and we need to know, more importantly, which one are they not. Because if we keep focusing on the same way of teaching, and you know they're not going to get it, we need to change. We had a student in kindergarten. His teacher loved him, but she said, I don't know what's wrong with this boy. Half the days he behaves, and half the day he doesn't. Kindergarten is when we do hearing tests, right? He was deaf in his left ear. So half the days he didn't listen, and half the days he listened. And once we knew he was deaf in one ear, she only talked to him from the right side. And then he was a perfectly behaved child. So don't assume it's a behavior issue. He just couldn't hear her on this side, and so he was ignoring her. Okay, so we need to look into what makes every child work. So, you know these kids? You can identify. Who's the most hyperactive kid in your class, right? Everybody knows. Does anybody not know? Sure, you go to all the classes. You can probably pick the hyperactive kid in every single class at UAF, right? Everybody knows them. Everybody knows their name. How about the most reserved? Doesn't get involved. They're not doing better in school. Every year they're barely making it. Teacher doesn't want to make them feel bad, so they're asking questions. And they just kind of sit in the corner year after year after year, and they don't learn. And we call them slow learners. So the slow learner who's reserved just hasn't felt the love and the passion. The teacher hasn't understood who they are. And the hyperactive child, we're asking them to be somebody they are not. We have to give them small goals. Help them be who they can be successfully. These are, for those of you who are more visual learners, and you want to see it this way, these are all the intelligences. And they revolve around that one child. And a child may be one way certain years, and they may develop other intelligences later. They may change. Your environment also changes you. We had a student who, we were happy if she got a D in math. That was it. We were just happy if she got a D in math. In 10th grade, something happened, and she had a teacher who motivated her. She now has a master's degree in teaching secondary math. Okay? Don't judge what a child is going to become. Now, This is probably the hardest thing for teachers. Hardest thing for moms, hardest thing for dads, because we think that the moment we gave birth to a child, we became smarter. The moment we had a classroom, we became smart. We have to understand that my students may be smarter than I am. My students may have skills that I don't have. I can learn from my students. So the culture I grew up in as a child, which was the Middle Eastern culture, said that adults are smarter than kids, and kids can't possibly teach adults anything, right? We have to rely on our kids. They have to know they have talents. So if you have a student who keeps, but Miss, they want to say something, if it's beneficial, let them say it. I've had teachers teach the class. I'm so tired some days, and they know exactly what they're, I'm like, get up. I'm going to sit in your seat, you're going to teach the class. And you know what? The students will learn more from them. Students listen to each other more than they listen to us. So if you have a student who has a skill and a talent, let that shine. Let him get up or her get up. And if, I've been amazed, like I said, my kids say, you've changed in the last few years. Bayan Academy has changed me. We put together some policies and we started enforcing them. We became better adults because we really started to learn from the kids. And I have a student who, little timid thing, little girl, can't talk in class. And then somebody said, you know what, she has a really strong voice. She does public speaking now. That little girl, who's a tiny little thing, gets on stage and she projects. She speaks. And we didn't think she could because she was so timid in class. Somebody heard her outside of class and said, you know what, start picking on this one. She can do it. Call her to the front. So they're not really your spies, they're your eyes and ears everywhere. Have people tell you hidden talents that kids may have and start working on them and make them feel good about showing what they have. So we had a conversation earlier today, I've been having it for years, about Muslims who say we shouldn't talk about all the good things we can do. Because it's haram. It's haram, right? We can't compliment each other, it's haram. And I've had teachers who won't, I'll tell them, give me 3 good things about me, 3 traits. They can't do it. They cannot identify 3 traits in themselves. It's because other people never showed them that they had 3 positive traits. And I tell them there's a couple of problems. First of all, we cannot thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what He's blessed us with if we don't know what we've been blessed with. The second thing is we cannot serve our communities if we don't know what we have to offer. So we have to start with the children so that they can take over and lead our communities, right? We have to show them how to identify what they can do, and we have to give them the chance. We have to give them the chance. And so, any of you guys going to ISNA this year? How many of you know the theme for the ISNA conference this year in Houston? I thought it was the corniest thing ever, and I talked to Brother Clay, he's next door. He was executive director at ISNA, and I said, you are just silly. I don't know what this is. It's what's your superpower? But since then, I've adopted it because I've discovered that we all have superpowers. And I discovered it from a 7-year-old boy 3 months ago. I went into class, and I was adjusting one of our TV sets. You know, you can pull them out when you turn it, and they're like, oh my gosh, how did you do that? Like, I have superpowers. I was kidding. You know, they're 7-year-old kids, we're kidding. So one little boy stood up, serious as a heart attack. Sister Magda, I have superpowers when I rely on Allah. 7 years old. Lord me. I've been talking about it since March because I was so shocked. This little boy, it's his first year in our school. He's been defiant, he's been stubborn. To give you an example of how stubborn he is, when we took our class pictures, the photographer said, do not enlarge this picture. I had to Photoshop his face in because he was like this. All the students were like this, and he was like this. So she took a picture of him from somewhere else and she stuck it on his head. And she's like, if you enlarge it too much, you're going to see that it's not actually sticking to his neck. It's a fake head. So I never thought anything like that would come from him. There are adults who haven't figured that one out. There are adults who have not figured out that we become superheroes when we rely on Allah. So, unleash your student superpowers. Let them not have Superman and Batman and Spider-Man as their heroes. Let them look at what are real superpowers. I know how to stop an argument. I know how to make people feel happy. I know how to come up with solutions. And have them identify things that they can do that they feel good about. So I do this with our staff even. Pick 3 things that you can accomplish every single day. Because most of us, by the end of the day, we feel so frustrated because we haven't done what we thought we should have done. And then we're not happy, and we go to bed not happy. I like happy. A lot of things I like. Happy is one of them. So pick 3 goals. I have 3 goals. I'm probably going to change them this year. It's been like 12 years. I'm going to probably adjust them. But they're still good. The first one is I have to do a good deed every day. And you know what? It kind of freaks people out because I'll open the door for somebody at Publix. I'm like, oh, I did my good deed for the day. They're like, what? But I have to recognize it for it to count. So I do a good deed every day. I have to find a solution to a problem. It can be a little problem. The table is wobbly, I stuck something under the leg, it's not wobbly anymore. It can be a big solution. Okay? And the third one, learn something new every day. And I actually say it out loud. That's another, freaks people out a little bit. I'll be saying, oh, I learned something new today. And they're like, so? But you have to, there are so many people. Later, ask people at lunch, what did you, well, not today, because I'm sure you learned something today, right? No. But ask your students, what did you learn yesterday? 90% will say nothing. Or I don't remember. Right? Get them used to recognizing, I tell them, if you go through 1 hour of your day and you have not learned something new, you just wasted that hour. Learn something new. And if it's not every hour, then at least once a day. And if you didn't learn something new every single day, you weren't paying attention. Because you can't, I remember once somebody asked me, are there enough problems to find a solution for something every day? Believe it or not, there are. It can be something very trivial, and it can be something major. But if you're focusing their brains on those things, pick 3 things that you can be happy about, that you accomplished. So make them small. And that goes for adults. We as adults beat ourselves up every day because we haven't done what we thought we had to finish today. Okay? So, and I just hit my time, and that's the last slide. I wonder if somebody's going to kind of make me be quiet. We didn't go to this one. Oh, that's when I hit the wrong switch. I don't like that slide. I don't like this slide. Anybody tell me why I don't like that slide? It's not about the Muslims. There's no women. There are no women. Anyway, this is just to prove to you that if you make ADHD diagnosed kids behave like normal, boring people like we are, we wouldn't have these amazing people. We would not have the inventors and the artists and the authors, people who sit down and write a book and they just sit down and read. Your most difficult student may be a very favorite. And this is the thing that you really have to understand. I know, but I missed a slide. You have to remember this. When you go to a lecture, so I was at this conference in Lakeland, and all these teachers complained about ADHD kids in their classroom. Then we went to a lecture, and there were 2 science teachers that were literally bouncing off the wall. These guys were like hyper crazy, but everybody loved their lecture. And I said to the teachers, you see these 2 guys? When they were in kindergarten, 1st grade, they were those hyperactive ADHD kids that nobody wanted in their class. But as adults, everybody wants to go to their lecture. Because you know what? They have passion, and they have energy, and they're creative. So when you look at your kids, the kids that get in trouble the most, I tell the parents, in 20 years, he's going to be a school administrator. And like, how do you know? And I'm like, I was that kid. I was the kid. I had somebody visit. Said, Muhammad Sharma. He knew me when I was little. He visited me when I was principal at UAF. He left, he tells his wife, "Are you sure this is the same person we knew when she was 10? Because I was somebody adults didn't like. But if you have that energy and that passion, and somebody can guide you in the right direction, you can do amazing things, inshallah. So I will stop talking, because that's what Sirwan is here to do. And inshallah, during the day, at lunch, during the networking sessions, we can talk if anybody has questions. But talk among yourselves and share ideas. That's the biggest reason we're here, for you to network and learn from each other. And talk about the most difficult child you have to another teacher. Don't mention their name, and let them find the solution with you. Inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan, inshallah.